Welcome to the Vitality Shift podcast for chiropractors. I'm your host, Dr. Don McDonald, author of the best-selling book, The Underdog Curse. Weekly, we will be interviewing amazing chiropractors from around the world, finding out how they made their vitality shift. If you're a chiropractor that either wants to just move your practice away from treating pain and conditions, or if you just want to stay inspired, this podcast is for you. For more information on past shows, please visit www.drdonmcdonald.com, and I hope you enjoy the show. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Vitality Shift podcast for chiropractors. This is Dr. Don McDonald, your host. And today I'm heading down to California, and I get to interview a chiropractor that we've been following lately on Facebook. And so a lot of you follow Brandy, and you know the Brandy has her long form Facebook posts that are long that people read and go, oh my gosh, I have to go through everything, because usually people have the attention span of a goldfish, or actually less than a goldfish, I think. And that's only like 2 or 3 seconds. So you have to actually really like the content in order to read through them. And my next guest, he has a lot of long form Facebook posts as well. And if you haven't followed him yet, I'd really recommend that you do follow him. And it's all on nutrition and the way the body is processing things. And we work with a lot of chiropractors around the world right now that are feeling a little bit burnt out, and the whole world's kind of flipped away from our paradigm. And chiropractors are feeling like they're kind of burnt out, maybe gained a little bit of weight, lost some energy, think that their adrenal glands are burnt out. And I thought this would be a great conversation to have with all of you. And the cool thing about chiropractic is as we learn more to help ourselves be healthier, we help all of our practice members that we're with too. So my guest today is Dr. Don Clum, the son of Dr. Jerry Clum. And he's a graduate of Life West, which I was joking with him before, like big surprise that he went to Life West when his dad was running the show. He graduated in 2000. And then we'll get a little bit into his story, but he's kind of like the littlest hobo, that old show on TV. I'm aging myself where he seems to travel all around the world. But I'm really excited to get into his story and then give some tips for our chiropractors listening out there to see if we can help us all get a little more vital so that we can serve our people better. So Dr. Don Clum, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
That's awesome. So how was it growing up with Dr. Jerry Clum as your dad?
Well, I don't know. He was just dad back then. Even now when people call me Dr. Clum, I go like this.
You look to see where he is.
Oh yeah, we got 7 of them in our family, so I don't know who they're talking to, and it definitely doesn't feel like me. But no, it was good. It wasn't a traditional second generation upbringing, because he was involved in school and the politics and all that, so he didn't have a practice. So right. I didn't get that side of it. When I went to Life, I did my undergrad at Life in nutrition. I met a lot of second generation kids going through school, and it was a totally different experience. So I think it helped me to not have that, because then I looked at other things and I was able to kind of make my own way.
That's interesting. And so you decided you were going to go nutrition. You did nutrition first, and then you went chiropractic second, or how did that go? I wanted to get the bachelor's, so I went for nutrition first. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And then going through school, I was very hate straight, a BJ Palmer upper cervical atlas only, very opinionated, very stubborn, all that kind of stuff, very arrogant with that. And then over time in practice, and the main thing that happened was when I came back to the States, we were out of the country for 10 years, in Costa Rica for 8, Spain for 2. When we came back, kids were getting to be middle school age, and we went to some of these events. We just saw trouble everywhere. Kids were overweight. And I couldn't believe they're sitting there watching the assembly, and their butts are hanging out of their pants. They're just like big, right? And then I went to the PTA meetings, and I saw why. So were the parents. And it really hit hard, because we were out of it, and then we came back into it. And I said, okay, we're going to do something, because I didn't want my family to go down that route, right? Because that's the default, apparently. I tell people, if you're not actively improving your health, you will passively lose it in the world we got now. And so I didn't want that. So it became a proactive thing. It was for me and my family first. And then it just evolved from there. And I liked it. I fought it for a long time. I don't want to do nutrition, this and that. Oh, no. Yeah.
But I got over it.
Well, and it's important. And again, a lot of, it's funny because when we work with chiropractors, sometimes as they go through school and maybe once they're in practice and they feel like maybe they're not succeeding as well as they could, maybe they think, hey, I'll add a new revenue stream and I'll add nutrition and I'll add some stuff, which sometimes it becomes a distraction at first. So it's funny because when we work with chiropractors, often we bring their focus back to what we do, which is so important. And then once you get rolling on that, then you got to make sure that you're vital. And so it's funny because once you kind of get rolling in the practice, for me, we don't really do nutrition for our people, but we have people around us that we can refer to for nutrition. But I think we can always continue to learn even for ourselves just to kind of maximize our potential. And it sounds like that's kind of what your interest is in.
Well, yeah, it's very hard to dabble. That's what I noticed. Totally. Can't play both sides of that line there. And so when we came back to New York, we opened up in New York, we got a space and we had a gym in there. I got a CrossFit box type gym in there and I ran the gym. I did the nutrition. My wife did the adjusting for the chiropractic. We had a wellness psychologist and a sports masseuse there. And we made it into a pretty integrative concept. Nice. So we got to be able to do a little bit of everything. And we just kind of gravitated to those different roles in there. And it worked fine. We liked it.
That's awesome. And so once you graduated, did you go to Costa Rica and then practice?
Yeah, we went to Costa Rica right out of when I graduated. Dana was already out about 6 months. She went to Sherman. And then we went down to Costa Rica. We worked for Life University at the Olympic Committee. And we were charged to get that part of that going and get it paying. It was free and stuff like that. So we did that for a year. And then that program didn't continue the same way. So we liked it there. So we stayed there. And over the next 7 years, we opened and bought and did offices. We had like 7 offices going and had a lot of fun. Great place to raise kids. Beautiful place. Beautiful people. Fantastic culture. Yeah. Kids were fully bilingual. And then we got to a point where all right, we're going to go back to the States. And my friend, old roommate from chiropractic college in Spain, is like, hey, you don't go back to the States until you come see what we got going on here. So I went and he had this little office that this guy was leaving. He's like, you can have it, take it, whatever you want. And the euro was $1.60 back then. It was all cash, like cash bills, not just like cash bills. Like every visit, they didn't even pay ahead of time. It's like every day you left, oh, this is what I earned. Office, this, that, this, me. Great. I loved it. It was great.
And so, and then you practiced there for 2 years?
Yeah, practiced there for 2 years.
Yeah. And then what made you decide to move away from there? It was just kind of like it was enough time, or
we went there with some different expectations than when we arrived. We went there. When I got there, I've been doing Spanish lay lectures and my communications for 8 years. I had a script that I do the same health talk twice a week for years, right? By the script. And I get there, no one understood me. It was frustrating. I would say, I know I said it in good Spanish. Costa Rica is very, very clear textbook Spanish. And they would turn to my CA and say, what did he say? And it was rough. So that was a little bit of friction there. It wasn't quite as easy as I thought.
Right.
And we got to a point, the association was looking for some help legally. We had enacted the first law for Costa Rica for chiropractic. So we were looking to do the same thing when we realized, man, that's a long trajectory over there. So we were either in it for a long time or we had to kind of figure out and get out.
Like cut it short a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And we wanted the kids middle school and high school to be in the States because there's nowhere like it for opportunity. Sports, Cub Scouts, extracurricular science, just don't have it.
Right. So then you move back and then you kind of, since then you said you kind of have like the virtual practice now. And so maybe explain that a little bit.
Well, we did move around a lot. And then we went back to New York. We had the wellness office. And then I had people that I was still trying to keep in touch with. So it was kind of by default. I was kind of working with these people. And then that's when I started to get into it, just kind of part-time, just online. I had a good friend who did the website and stuff. And it was okay. It was just a hobby for a while. And then I did nutrition as part of our program in the office. Yeah. And a lot of cellular level detox. And I got into studying that. It wasn't until, and then my friend Darren White, chiropractor, his wife's a chiropractor, he came out to visit. And Darren had started a screening company, like spinal screening, to go to businesses and get people in the office. He had four of them got together. Fast forward 15 years, it's now is a very large, very profitable population health company that oversees like 1.5 million lives. It's amazing. And so when he came out to see me, he loved what I was doing. We were doing great stuff with diabetics and post chemo people, just just great stuff. And he's like, can you translate that into a population? I'm like, I don't know. So you want to try? I said, sure. He said, okay. So long story short, sold the stuff there, moved out to Washington, and I started writing and researching programs, health programs for the population health company, which they contract big companies, like 10,000 people or more. They do a platform. People opt in. They get points. The points, they get swag or money off their insurance, things like that.
Nice.
And so I wrote, the main thing I wrote was a diabetes prevention program, the first one validated diabetes prevention program that went against the national. It was not the traditional thing.
Right.
So we went and we learned a lot with that. But I really had to get into the mechanisms and understand this because these big companies, some of them had 100,000 employees.
Right.
They had their own medical boards and their scientific boards that you had to get through.
Right.
And that scared the heck out of me, right? Here's this chiropractor coming, right? Going to talk about diabetes prevention. And so I was armed to the teeth. I was ready. Luckily, nothing bad, but I had a learning curve. That world is very conservative. So like, I couldn't say things like high fat. We had to be fat, smart fat, right?
Right.
Couldn't say high intensity interval training because they can't do things. That's CrossFit and they'll kick you out. So we said variable output exercise, right? And you couldn't say fasting or alternate, so we would say alternate day eating times, things like that. So, and it worked and we launched it and it did great in those programs. That program in particular has gone to thousands of people now. Great outcomes, biometrics data is proving. It actually lowered all their metabolic risk factors where the national program has yet to do that. All they can do is lose a little bit of weight in that one. But we changed cholesterol, we changed blood pressure, we changed blood sugar and waist circumference, you name it. And it was validated every 6 months, year after year. It was great. It was fantastic.
That's awesome.
And that led to a sleep program that led to a fast fitness, mood and food, a metabolic syndrome program, stress building resilience to stress program, all that kind of stuff. And that's when I got into making these programs.
That's cool. Now, if you're okay, so we have chiropractors out there. We are vitalistic chiropractors, and we have the philosophy chiropractic, and we know about like salutogenesis and all that kind of stuff. And if someone's just not up to snuff too much in nutrition, what would be kind of the top things that you'd suggest the chiropractors look into, like even for themselves, and then also kind of lead their practice members towards? Or what do you think? My whole program,
I built the whole program based off of the second half of the sophomore text in the chiropractic textbook by Stevenson from 1927. It's all in there. It's all in there. Diet, nutrition, and it tells you how they view it and how it either agrees with chiropractic or chiropractic approves of it. And so it doesn't absorb it. It doesn't deny it. It's awesome. And so cool. I use that's how I set up everything and the way I approach it. So you're talking about basic nutritional habits now? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Or what would be the most common things you'll see that people can address? Because it's funny because first of all, we'll talk about, because we always talk about the stress response because we're always talking about decreasing sympathetic dominance. And you did have a really cool post talking about the adrenals versus insulin and how we always kind of go after the adrenals. Maybe you can just break that down a little bit for us.
Sure. Yeah. My model, I coined it and confuses everybody, the neuroendocrine tone. And basically, I took BJ's safety pin cycle and I rerouted it to more modern understanding of the nervous system and because I was like, the brain cell does not innervate the tissue cell like they thought.
Right.
So there's a gap. What's the gap? And that became the hormones, neurotransmitters, and that's the neuroendocrine connection, right? And so it brought that together. And then that's where this came from, the sympathetic, parasympathetic versus the hormonal hormonal growth and repair. They're all that's where you get to play with all of those and they come together.
Right.
And so it's pretty cool. And we talked about the adrenals, adrenal fatigue. That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
Adrenal insufficiency. But when we're looking at it really on a hormonal and an interactive way, you notice that only a third of our cortisol and those hormones are made from the adrenals. Actually, a third of it's made in our fat cells and another third's made in our brain. Because remember, cortisol is anti-inflammatory. It's like natural prednisone.
Right.
And when we burn fat, that actually is an inflammatory process. It's an immune process. And so that makes sense that it's there. It's there in the brain because the brain is very sensitive. And so we beat up the adrenals like you're doing this to our whole body, when in reality it could be coming from all sorts of stuff. And so we don't have to do that. We don't have to slam the poor adrenals. If we work more holistically together, you see some big changes without having to do that. So, and then there's insulin. Well, it's cortisol and insulin. They're the two bullies on the playground, right?
Right.
They one's bad, the other one's a minion, and they get together and they mess with every other hormone on the block. It messes everything up when they're out of control.
Right.
And insulin and cortisol are some of the only hormones that you can activate anytime you want, right? With a thought, with a perception, with food, not eating food, with activity, physical activity or exercise, without it, sleep or not, all of it. And so we can have that thing cranking 24/7, and we do. And therefore, that messes with all the other ones, right? And when insulin's there, it's magnifying cortisol. When cortisol's there, it magnifies insulin. And then they both team up on the poor thyroid, and you get that all whacked out. And together, they're really doing. The sex hormones get thrown off.
Yeah.
You know, the downstream things like the neurotransmitter receiving centers, they get thrown off. It just messes with everything. It's like a storm going on that level. So.
Now, when you're working, because it's funny, because we've always heard lots about the adrenals and cortisol, right? And just not as many people talk about the insulin thing. And so, like, when you work with someone, is it kind of very unique to them, or is there kind of like something that you're going to hit first if you're working on someone, or suggesting of someone?
No, I mean it's like a chiropractic exam. Report. You know when they walk in, you can look at them and see what you're going to do. Well, you got to go through some of it for them, some of it's for you. Mm-hmm. But the reality is there's a trifecta of hormone issues always. Cortisol, insulin, thyroid.
Right.
Just got to find out which one's dominant, right? What's the hierarchy?
Yeah.
There's always a gut issue going on. There's always a detox needed, whether it's cellular or heavy metal or a neurotoxin type of thing. You know, you figure that out, right? But I do 6-month programs, so I got time. I don't do anything shorter than that. You know, I tell them this because it's a lifestyle program. What I like about my program, I like about that book, is everything I do as part of the core program is lifestyle, is modern, because I research it, metabolic lifestyle, and you don't need any other supplements or medications or products to get to move that needle like we do. If you want to use things like that, or the client wants to use, or I think something is needed, we can use it, but then it's truly a supplement. It's supplementing what they're already doing. And I explained to them, the body is a demand-driven machine,
right? Not
a supply-driven machine. If it was a supply-driven machine, I would just take 400 grams of protein every day and I look like a bodybuilder, right?
Right.
Done. But why? I know I went through that. It doesn't work like that. So, but if you do the right things and create the demand in the body, and you give them some things that are, you know, very efficient, very effective for the body, some raw materials, it picks it up and it works really well. Otherwise, you know, you pour it all over, it doesn't work.
Great. Cool. Talk a little bit about fasting, because I know fasting, there's some confusion out there, and like I know you talk in your Facebook posts about people just not eating for like one day or something like that, and they think it's fasting. Maybe just talk about what is fasting and what's the benefits of it, just so that people can understand a little bit better.
You would think something as simple as not eating for a while would be straightforward, but man, this gets messed up all the time. I just got kicked out of a fasting group on Facebook yesterday. You know, we get, just like anything else, we get very dogmatic. This is the definition. This is this, and I back up and I say, no, I'm looking at the mechanism. What's the pathway? Why are we doing this?
Right.
It's not just a fast. The point of being able to do a 7-day fast isn't the 7-day fast. It's to get there and be able to do a 7-day fast whenever you want. Right? It's like going to a marathon, just showing up, grabbing a t-shirt and going. If I did that, I would really hurt myself.
Totally.
Right? Might as well just buy the t-shirt and go home. Right? That's what I'm there for, the trophy. No, the point of doing a marathon is the 6 months, the year leading up to it, that you trained and you were disciplined and you did what you need to do to get there. Mm-hmm. Same thing with a long-term fast. You know, and fasting, there's phases, and people don't go all the way through. The first phase is the prep. First, you got to plan. You better have a plan. You don't just say, okay, on Monday, let's go do a fast. Who's with me? Like on social media.
Yeah, you hear that all the time. Yeah, totally.
So you make the plan, and then you have a prep time. And you got to prep the right way, because when you go, you want to then, because in the prep, there's food, there's nutrition concepts, you want to address insulin the best you can as you lead into that fast. Things like you want to get fiber out at a certain time, you want to change water consumption. And then as you go in, there's the actual fast. So you got the prep, then the actual fast. And then during the fast, you can support or not. And this is where people get all crazy. Like, is it a water fast, or is it a dry fast, or is it, they call it dirty fast? I'm like, man.
Or juice fast.
Or juice fast. And then there's the break the fast refeeding. And then there's the post-fast regimen, which nobody is doing out there, which I can get to. But the point of doing it is you get stable going into it. You go through the fast. Your body, you already have insulin a little bit lower. You go in there, insulin drops. Okay, blood sugar drops, ketones from burning fat go up, and the body starts working on fat and ketones. So it becomes fat adaptive. And then within a certain amount of time, depending on the person, anywhere from 18 hours to 72 hours, a process kicks in to start cleaning the body, to really detoxify. It's called autophagy. A lot of people know about that now. And what that is immune cells go out and they start picking up broken cells, old cells that aren't working too good. It'll even pick up bacteria and virus, and also precancerous early cells as well. Dr. Seyfried, that wrote the textbook, Cancer is a Metabolic Disease, he says 1 7-day water fast a year would eliminate the formation of 97% of new cancers.
Really?
And that's a researcher. This is not a holistic dude. This is a researcher for years. This is his thing. And it's because of the autophagy, breaks it down. So it breaks it down. When we break down the cells, that stimulates the body to say, hey, we're losing cells, we're recycling cells, so we need to replace some cells. And what happens is the bone marrow and the spleen starts making stem cells. Stem cells, like we're talking brand new cells. We're not talking about a cell that divided in one, we're talking a brand new cell. Wow. Right? Naive, they call it a naive cell. New telomeres, new genes, everything, like a baby cell, like an embryonic. And so then that stem cell goes wherever the body needs to, and it implants into the brain. So we can have a new brain cell, and it implants into the heart cell, goes into muscle cell, wherever it needs, liver cell. And it gets in there, and it joins up and it hooks up, and it becomes new cells for our tissues and organs. Talk about anti-aging or growing anew, right? Turning back the clock. It's fantastic. People pay a lot of money to get that stuff injected in the, on a regular basis, and you can make them yourselves.
Right.
So now you got the stem cells. They're being put into the tissue that we need, and then as you come off the fast, you want to do it in a good way so that you don't disrupt that process, because it's going to continue for a while once from the food you're eating. Yeah. So like if you get off a fast, the next thing you know, you're hitting a bunch of insulin foods, a bunch of carbs or processed foods, or even a bunch of heavy protein foods, because protein can stop that process as well, because the actual autophagy, the breakdown of the cells, the cleanup part, is controlled by a thing called mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin. mTOR is to amino acids and protein what insulin is to carbs. Very similar. They work very similar. And so if too much mTOR gets stimulated, boom, shuts off autophagy. Too much insulin gets stimulated, boom, shuts off repair. Right there. Goes into growth. That's not what we want. So we got to keep that hormonal profile going. You keep those cells kicking in, and then you got to keep them. If you don't have a good regimen for at least 4-6 weeks after to train those cells into their new tissue, they get recycled up to like 95%. Will just be gone. So people do this fast. They did all this stuff to do this fast. They got through it, and they don't support it all the way through, and that's a lot of work to burn through some brand new stem cells. So there's phases to it. So when they just say, "Oh, I'm just going to fast," I'm just this. It's a lifestyle. It's like chiropractic. It's a lifestyle. You got to commit to it. There's a lot of parts to it. It's not just, and it's definitely not just skipping breakfast. That drives me crazy all the time. This intermittent fasting. Traditionally, intermittent fasting means you do a 24-hour fast multiple times over a period of time, intermittently, up to whatever you want. Up to a week is what it really was, and that was intermittent fasting. So when they started coming out with that, I was like, oh, we used to call that meal timing. But so in our office we had a definition of diets, and we had this one diet. We called it the basic human eating plan. Now it would be called paleo, and then we had the high fat version, which now would be keto. It's just funny how because they used to make fun of us. Now they're all doing it. Just crazy.
That's interesting. So let's go on the other. So before we move on, So if someone was going to do a 7-day fast with the prep time and then the post time, like how much time is that? Is that like 3 months or something like that?
Well, the backbone of my program for the nutrition side has what I call a progressive fasting rotation calendar. And we map it out in the 6 months. Is all mapped out. No 2 weeks back to back are the same. We change it. We use meal timing, meal spacing, food combining. We use intermittent fasting, traditional. We use alternate day concepts, and then we work our way up to full block fasts. But it's gradual, because here you have to retrain the body. You have to be in metabolic shape to do that, like the marathon, right? And if you do it, I analyze every weight loss and diabetes prevention and diabetes program you can imagine, preparing to go to these big medical boards and pitch. And I learned a lot of stuff. And there's definitely certain points in programs where if something's not met, they drop out. Like hunger is the number one reason people drop out of any health or weight loss program. So you go, okay, how do we deal with that? And there's certain points. So what I did is I created the pattern of the calendar with the different things that they're doing, so that they would do what's called a soft catch. You'd be like, I know they're coming here, and you just kind of, and they didn't even know it, and you kept them going. And so the follow through and the success rate went up dramatically with that. And so, so the first thing in the process is we want to get insulin under control. Eventually it'll function better, but we at least want to get the numbers down. Yeah. Because then we do that, and we get cortisol as well, because we have a resilience section to it as well, along with sleep. And if cortisol and insulin just play a little bit nice. They're not fixed yet. They just play a little bit nice. They stop terrorizing ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, and leptin, which is the satiation hormone. And what we saw was people who had decades of emotional eating as a base of their problem suddenly didn't have it anymore. No more emotional eating, no more cravings, no more hunger. I think acute hunger is aberrant. I think that doesn't exist, and we got something wrong there. And so if you go into, you're doing this process and you're coming up to these bigger fasts and you're not hungry, there's no cravings, there's no emotional eating, it's a heck of a lot easier. I've never had anybody not be able to do the fasting on the program. I've had some people, we had to choose a different route because they were pregnant or breastfeeding, but that was a choice. No one got there and couldn't do it. But I'll tell you, 80% when they see the calendar, they're like, I can't do that. No way.
Like at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I don't show it to them until after they pay, right? I'm not, otherwise I get nobody, right? And they all, by the time you get there, is about the middle of the program. You get to the middle of the program, you hit the high point, they get through it, and then we bring them back down to the backside. And then you got the metabolic exercise pairing in there. We have sleep element, stress element, all sorts of stuff.
Now let's go the opposite way, because one of the other posts I remember you writing about was people saying to increase their metabolism, they eat more frequently during the day, and just in a general basis, how you're recommending less frequent, because we get some people, for example, who've been really burnt out, like they're totally burnt out, but they're actually not eating enough, so that, or at least they're eating later in the day, like they don't have breakfast and they wait till later on. So it'd be like the intermittent fast that you're just talking about, but they're not doing well. And like, for example, I did a lot of work with Dr. Michael Hall, so I kind of burnt my adrenal glands out pretty bad. Maybe it was insulin too, because this was like 10 years ago, and he had suggested that I have some protein earlier in the day to help with that, and that did help come around, and have a little bit of protein during my shift. So if I'm adjusting for, like, say 7 hours, and there's like a 3-hour chunk and a 4-hour chunk, I wasn't eating throughout that whole period of time, but I was already burnt out. So I was just curious about that idea between eating a little bit more frequently, if your demand's on, and then eating less frequently, like you're talking about in that post.
Well, in studying these programs and looking back to the origin, how did they come about? Who put these in place? Which is what guided the American Dietary Standards back in 1982. That's when this came out. Now we have 40 years of data on it. And I'm looking at it going, oh, we got to learn something. For not only did it not prevent diabetes.
Right. It made more people heavy.
It's argumentative. You can make a good argument that it made people worse, and all it did is delay it maybe 3.5 years. But everyone, the same statistics still got it, which is kind of sad. So anyway, looking at that, the reason they came up with the multiple meals is not because of metabolism. It's because they were trying to avoid reactive hypoglycemia. Because when people eat junk, especially very, that spikes your insulin, spikes your blood sugar very easily.
Yeah.
It comes down really fast. And when it comes down really fast, it goes like this, up, and then comes down below where they were. That's the reactive part. It'll go down, the blood sugar will go down lower than it was before when it started. And that's the number one trigger for hunger, what we're calling acute hunger.
Right.
So they know that if it went too low, they would come back up and they'd be hungry and they'd eat a lot more. So that's what they wanted to avoid. So all they're trying to do is keep the blood sugar like this. Right. Not the insulin, but the blood sugar.
Right.
And what they didn't realize is here's the blood sugar being nice and calm. Every time you eat, insulin's getting hit. And it doesn't go down as fast as blood sugar. So it's going up. And at the end of the day, you're ending higher than you started. And over time, that number goes up and up and up. And that's part of what contributes to insulin resistance over time. Was too much. So that's the thing, the multiple meals. And then they went low cal, low fat, daily restrictions. That's the other thing that messes people up. And that's why people who are doing intermittent fasting over time can see themselves go backwards or plateau with that, because they keep doing the same thing every day. That's why I have a fasting rotation. No 2 weeks are the same. Right. The body likes the start, stop, start concept, like interval training, up and down, right? It's a better workout metabolically. You take walks. It's better to do multiple small walks than it is one long walk, because it's starting and stopping these systems, and the body likes that a lot. And so we just carried that on, and we rolled that right into our gig. So, because what happens is, whatever you're doing every day the same, you adapt to. Just like if you do the same workout every day, eventually doesn't do much for you, right? So they were doing low calorie, low fat, whole 9 yards, multiple meals. So they're hitting insulin. So low calorie, but high insulin, low fat, high insulin. Body eventually adapts. So they lose some weight. Usually the average is like 8 to 12 pounds, right? And then they lose it, and then they stop. And then the only answer they would get was, well, okay, cut a little bit more. So they started off cutting off 500 calories. Now they cut maybe 300 more. And we would get people, they're coming in, they're at 1,000 calories a day, and they can't lose weight. And they got weight to lose. Because the same thing, what also happens is, as it stays steady, the metabolism goes, okay, cool. We're only getting 1,500 calories a day.
We'll adapt to it.
We're going to adjust our budget, right?
Totally.
And it's not going to overspend. The body doesn't overspend. And then you cut it a little bit more. They might get a couple more pounds, but then it adapts. And then they feel like crap. They're not sleeping. They don't have the energy. Brain fog starts kicking in. And if you continue eating that way, your high insulin exposure, then you start building insulin resistance, which causes liver fat, eventually pancreas fat, and it's just the whole cascade of what we know, what's on the insulin resistance spectrum kicks in. Yeah, and once it's the big elephant in the room is this: even with natural people, once they're on that path, or say they're type 2 diabetic, just lowering their blood sugar to normal does not change their future. You can make someone you can take a type 2 diabetic and you can keep them type 2 diabetic with normal blood sugar, with a drug, with a supplement or something like that, if you're just doing that. Because the problem is not the blood sugar, it's the insulin. If that still stays a problem, they're still going to get all the sequelae that comes from it. They're still going to die earlier. So they'll be miserable in the last 10 years. It'll be expensive, but they'll have good blood sugar, right? So we have to work on that metabolism, that mechanism, that metabolic function, change it so that now the insulin changes, the blood sugar eventually change. And it usually happens pretty fast. Blood sugar is pretty quick. You can get someone's blood sugar down in a week or two, pretty easy with a lot of things. But getting that insulin response and that resistance to change on a cellular and organ level, that takes more. It can be done. It can be done.
Now, to give an example, I know it's more specific because everybody's individual, but say, for example, somebody's listening to this and they go, oh, I think I've been jacking my insulin too much for a long time. What are some basic principles that people could start doing? Because again, you said it's going to take time. Like, it's just like chiropractic care. We get immediate ease after an adjustment, but you need to keep that up to create sustained ease. And it'd be the same thing, I'm sure, with the nutrition. What are some things that chiropractors could do that maybe just help to kind of not jack that out so much?
Yeah, I call it, in my world, is the insulin-friendly diet and lifestyle. Mm-hmm. That's what's got to chime in your head. And it's like people always ask, what's your favorite detox? What do you use for detox? I said, nothing. Then what's your favorite? I said, you just stop retoxing. There you go. That's step one, right?
Right.
You want to detox?
Sounds too easy. It can't be that easy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, don't want to do that. How else can I do it? Isn't there a pill?
Yeah.
Or an herb or whatever? Yeah. So you stop doing the offensive. You learn what the offensive behavior is, which, from the nutrition side, you got to get insulin exposure down from your foods. So there's an insulin index. It's different than the glycemic index. Something can have a low glycemic index and still have a high insulin, which is confusing for people. But we teach that. And so you stop taking it in that way. And then with your body, you got to start moving certain ways. And sometimes a good exercise at the wrong time isn't helping or can actually make things worse. What you need to do is you need to increase your glycogen flexibility in your muscles. Bottom line, glycogen that stores sugar for the muscles in the muscles, the capacity to store that sugar can vary 4,000% in someone who's sedentary versus like a competitive athlete. That's a huge window. And so it's not one size fits all. It's not once you have it, you always have it. You got to open that up and you got to be able to move sugar in and out of that muscle easily. That's a big reservoir before the spillover happens with other problems. And so that's the physical side, intensity training, short duration, high intensity, stuff like that. So that's diet. That's the basic fundamentals. And then that's what you eat. That's how you move. There's also when you eat. And like you said earlier, first thing you do is just eat 3 meals a day, no snacking. Just do that for me. In the big population health studies, I didn't meet these people. I lectured them once a week. They had coaches that they worked with. So I had to make things simple and effective and layer them in. And one of the things we learned is that the average person shifting to 3 meals a day and not snacking makes a big difference in their life and their metabolic life. It'll change their biomarkers. They'll lose weight. They'll feel better, even if they don't change what they eat. I don't recommend that, right? You could do a lot more, but because these are very innocent, humble people. They didn't sign up for this. Their job kind of gave it to them and said, you get some swag if you do it. They didn't pay for it. So it's really a weird interaction. So they did it. And one coach brought me this woman. She's like, I can't deal with Mary anymore. Can you please talk to her? I'm like, okay. I talked to her. She's a very nice lady, somewhere in the Midwest, deep South. I don't remember. And she said, Doc, don't worry about me. I got this down. I said, great. What are you eating? She's like, every morning for breakfast, I have juice and vegetables. So I start the day off right. I'm like, great. That's fantastic, Mary. I'm like, what's the problem? What do you have for breakfast? She goes, every day when I get to work, I go to the vending machine. I get my Funyuns and my Mountain Dew. That's her vegetables.
Her first snack. Yeah.
And her juice.
Oh, geez.
Juice and vegetables. That's her breakfast. That's what she was calling.
Oh, that's what she was defining vegetables and fruit. Wow.
Juice, she was saying. Yeah, it's not fruit. And so, and she was serious, right? And so, you get people who are doing that are driving for a living or night workers. And so we learned that if you just get them to just stop snacking and eat 3 meals a day, their pants will shift, their energy will shift, and their blood markers will shift. Because here's the other thing. In those studies, if they didn't meet a certain goal, we didn't get paid. So I was highly motivated. I'm like,
yeah.
Just that's why if we put out 6 different strategies, if you do maybe 3 of them, 20%, they'll still get there, right?
Great.
So that's what we learned to do, is combine the right things at the right time, and it compounded the effect. So that you don't have to change everything in your life 100%, but if you get these 3, 4, 5 different things and change them 20%, the net gain is huge.
Right. Well, I think that's the key with anything, is finding what's the least amount of change you can do to give you the most amount of results. Right.
Yeah.
Now, eating in the morning, just curious, like, do you recommend, I know it might be different with each person, but eating like closer to when you wake up or once you've been awake, or does that make a difference?
It does. The research shows a pretty good difference. Like, for example, when people do intermittent fasting, they're skipping breakfast.
Yeah.
In reality, the studies show, especially for women, if they ate breakfast and skipped dinner, it'd be much better, be up to 30% better results. But try talking someone into skipping dinner at their family every night. It's hard. I did a 30-day fast and I was still cooking for my family. That was the hardest part. I had to make like a little bowl of broth so I could sit there and not just stare at them and them stare at me when I'm not eating, right? Never mind cook their food. So, there are things like that. We talk about that pyramid stacking your meals, where you have big at breakfast, medium at lunch, and small at dinner. Sometimes, especially for men, we there's indications when you want to separate veg and starch from protein, from animal protein or fat, and it makes a big difference. And which meal do you do that with? Usually it's lunch is the best. And so there are things like that, and I only bring them in when there's like an obstacle or stall or something, because people don't usually want to change all that much, but there are definitely better ways to do it. The other side of it, fasting in today's world can be dangerous. Not because fasting is dangerous, because people are sick and they're on meds.
Right.
You start the wrong person too fast, or not watch them and not know the warning signs of certain medication interactions with fasting, you can have a problem.
Right.
You can have a problem. I had an attorney call me, and he was not happy with me, and it wasn't even my client. Someone online took my writings, printed up, was given it to patients. Patient had a problem, passed out, hit her head, hospital, stitches, concussion, the whole 9 yards. And it went to the practitioner and said, "Hey, you gave her this. It's under your license." No, I got it from Dr. Don Clum. He gave it to me. I'm like, didn't go very far, but it scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, totally.
And that's when I really went into it, took some seminars and really got into that side of it, because that's a reality. And again, it's not because fasting is inherently bad or does this. It's when someone's it's like if you're working with insulin, blood sugar naturally comes down. If they're still on a medication to lower blood sugar, they're going to bottom out.
It goes really down. Yeah, totally.
It goes fast. They're over medicated. So I have a whole thing. Here's how you talk to your doctor. If you want him to talk to me, if he's or she is willing, no problem. They usually aren't. But I give them the language. It's basically like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is why. I want to know how you can support me. You're not asking permission.
Right.
You're not asking opinion. Just,
right.
I want to know. And if they can't support you, you got a decision to make, right? Things like that. Then they're close with the prescriber. Things like thyroid, that can be an issue too. With that, any hormone replacement, including melatonin, can be wonky, right?
Really, yeah.
And then the refeeding, if that's not, depending on the person, you do some weird stuff. Some people do weird stuff. I don't know why, but like when they're coming out of their fast, they'll triple their water intake. And that's not a good idea. When you're coming out of a fast, when you fast, extended fast, you naturally start to dehydrate. That's just innate work. I don't know why. And so you drink more naturally, and then they keep it up. And then when you're refeeding, it can actually cause a good amount of intestinal distress and things like that. Now, when I'm talking about interactions with medicine and health conditions, I have some posts on that if people are interested. I'm talking about 3 days or more of straight fasting. I'm not talking intermittent fasting. Because remember, intermittent fasting is skipping breakfast, not fasting, right?
Yeah.
When people, I go in these rooms because patients tell me,
yeah.
and I write down the questions I see. How would I answer? I'm getting this data, and I just see this craziest stuff. And it's like, "Oh, I've been fasting now for 17 hours, and I'm like 17 hours, really?"
But actually, the more you talk about it, the more it does sound like it's like you said, running the marathon, right? If you're really horribly out of shape, like running inherently isn't bad for you, but if you're horribly out of shape and you go running, that could be catastrophic.
Yeah, totally. And there's other things you can do with fasting. Once someone is got that talent now or that skill, you can do things like we do things like anabolic rebounds, where especially with men, where you train a certain way, need a certain way going into a fast. You have supplements that support going through it. Then when you come out, you refeed a certain way. Again, supplements that support it, mainly because when you fast, your growth hormone goes up naturally. So you want to, hey, how do we help you do this, right? And insulin goes down. Hey, how do we keep that down? And then how do we that mitochondria? They need to work hard, So we do that, and then when they come out of the fast, they refeed, they puff, they pop. That's what natural bodybuilders have been doing things like that forever because they don't have the drugs.
Yeah.
And so it's just piggybacking on that, and it just gets you. And they'll see veins, they'll see things. It's just even in the 40s, 50s, they'll see the change. And so we do that. We also do stuff with a lot of stuff with peri and menopause issues, because insulin is the core root for a lot of female cycle issues.
Mm-hmm.
Really bad PMS, it could be from that. Endometriosis, definitely. PCOS is caused by insulin resistance. Some fibroids, not all, are either aggravated or caused by insulin resistance. And a lot of the symptoms of menopause. There's cultures out there that don't even have a word for menopause. It's not a big issue. And you look at them, like in the blue zones and stuff like that, you look at them and you see why. They have an insulin-friendly diet and lifestyle.
Right.
And then there's the guys, you got to talk to them too, because they all want to be bigger, stronger, faster. When I had the gym, all the high school kids taking tubs of this and tubs of that. I'm like, oh, get them off all that junk, right? It's hard. It's hard because then if you're overly muscular, you have the same problems in lifespan as someone who's morbidly obese, just about. And people don't like to hear that. Power lifters, bodybuilders, big guys for a long time, you just cut your life down, right? Because I call it the excess tissue hypothesis. Tissue is tissue. And if you got X amount over your limit, fat or muscle, you're going to wear down the system. And we learned that from the Okinawans in Japan, the centenarians, right? They want to know, this village is very isolated. This amount of people live to be 100. This amount of people live to be 75. But when they isolated everything around them, the only thing that they saw different was their height. That's the only thing they could isolate. The difference between being 75 or living to 100 appeared to be 3 inches in height, which really pissed me off because I'm 6'4". I'm like, great, I'm done, right? And my kids are
I'm
like,
6'4" too, so we both be screwed.
I'm like, oh. And so that's when we started shifting. We had powerlifting teams at the gym, and high school, starting at 7 years old up through high school, adults. We competed nationally on that. And the whole mantra was be as strong as you can, as light as you can.
Right.
At the lightest weight.
Yeah.
Strong, right? We teach the only way to grow more muscle fiber, to really grow more muscle, is elongation, right? It's concentric contraction. And when you get puffed up, you get hypertrophy. There's no more muscle there than anyone else. It's just different. It just blows up. So we talk about that.
I was just going to say, you had one more post that was really interesting about the amino acids, like the drinks at the gym while you're working out. I was just interested in that. So tell maybe the listeners a little bit of that, because a lot of times the idea behind it is that you work out and then you take the amino acids and then it helps to restore and build tissue right away or something after. I
get more junk talk from the gym rats on this stuff than I get from anybody else, even within the vaccine people, right? They just, they go after me. Branched chain amino acids, when they're isolated, like in a powder or a drink, they stimulate the crap out of insulin, worse than sugar. Wow. Same thing with all powdered proteins. See, what happens, the whole story about how insulin and blood sugar works is wrong. But it's an easy tell, so they keep saying it. You eat something, you start to digest it in your stomach and upper intestine. Your body interprets that. There's hormones called incretin hormones. I have that book right here. I was just going through it. And those incretin hormones go in and they stimulate the first phase of insulin response. That's up to 70% of insulin's coming in that first phase. And that food's not even in the bloodstream yet. It hasn't hit the pancreas. Right. When it finally gets in there and hits the pancreas, that's the second phase, right? A little bit after to kind of make up the difference. So your body's interpreting it, not just sensing protein, fat, carb. It's interpreting it. And so when things are really broken down, like a flour or a powder of any kind, the body, or really processed, the body, I don't know why, but it just cranks up the insulin. It's almost like it doesn't know what to do. So you take 30 grams of pure protein powder and 30 grams of red meat, chicken, whatever you want, and in the same amount of protein, exactly, eat them, insulin response completely different. Powders go, especially like whey protein, branched chain amino acids. So if you're and here's the deal. Here's why this is bad, because insulin works on a teeter-totter with human growth hormone, which is what you're trying to do when you work out. So you do this great workout, you get this surge going, and at night you're waiting, because at night's when it comes out, you're gonna get that surge. But what happens is you take that shake, that glorified milkshake, that protein shake, or just the branched chain amino acids, at that moment cranks up insulin, and guess what happens to that teeter-totter? Boom, growth hormones down. You just kicked yourself in the foot. Right.
It's so funny, because that's such a like, even just when I was had a trainer, it's just so funny, because that's what everybody does.
A lot of it comes because of the big boys, right? When you're jacked on a whole bunch of steroids and hormones, you can do things differently they can do things differently than you and I. And we look at them and say, "Oh, I want to do that. I want to look like," it ain't the same, man. You don't have the chemistry. Let's just put it that way, right? And so they take a lot of stuff. And because I worked with professional bodybuilders, powerlifters, athletes, and I work with them natural. I work with them when they're on cycle. I've worked with them off cycle, and I've worked with them later in their life when they're trying to have a normal life after, running a chemistry set for 20 years.
Right.
So it's something. So it's different. They have a different physiology and metabolism. You can't compare. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from.
That's interesting. Well, if there's any chiropractors out there that would interested in working with you, or learning more about what you do, what's the best way they can either follow you or get information from you?
Yeah. My personal Facebook page is Don Clum. You can follow, you can friend request with a note, let me know. I'm constantly trimming and moving that one around, but I use my personal because you just have a little more flexibility than I did on my professional. Just was tanking. I don't, I have to pay for everything. So and that's where I educate. There's no click and buy. There's no pitch on my Facebook page. So if you just want to go and learn this stuff, I have hundreds of posts on all this stuff over the years. I have dozens of the medical or the continuing education slides that I use for medicine and chiropractic and nutrition. And when I teach it, I have videos on there. I have podcast interviews like this from years past. And so it's all free and you can all go check it out. And then at any time, go ahead and comment or shoot me a message and question and then go from there.
That's awesome. So when people work with you, do they just reach out? Do you have a website or do they just reach out to you and email you?
Right through Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah. No, they send me a message. We start to connect and we see where it goes. Usually I just set up like a meet and greet call just to say, hey, what are you looking for? I don't want some crazy expectations. Here's how I work. If it's good, we move from there. If not, give them some pointers and that's it.
That's cool. Now, just a fun question. If you were to fly back through time and be able to talk to yourself when you're 18, what would you say to your younger self?
Wow.
For advice or if you had like fatherly advice to yourself when you're younger?
Well, that was a really tough time for me. I was a big baseball player. I was signed to go to play with the Colorado Rockies. And they just opened the franchise. And that year I got in a car accident and I lost it all.
Wow.
And so I would go to that guy and say, pick your head up. It ain't over. Cause I was ready to drop out of school. I didn't know I was done. And that was hard. I would just turn his head around and say, hey, it ain't over. You got some good stuff coming, might not be baseball, but you got some good stuff and jump on that. So that's what I would say. That's
awesome. That's great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for the invite. I love it. Anytime you want. As you can tell, I can talk about this all day.
That's great. No, and again, listeners out there, like if you enjoyed this, reach out, ask some questions. If we have any specific things, we might have them on again, just if we can run some scenarios by them and just kind of help everybody out, because we know the more chiropractors we work with, we help them work on practice, like maybe 20%. And then 80% we're working on either personal development or increasing the vitality of the chiropractors themselves, because as soon as chiropractors feel stronger and feel and more focused in their brain, it affects all areas of their life. And so this is super helpful.
Well, that's why a lot of chiropractors refer me people, because I'm working within the same philosophy and tenets as chiropractic. Never will I conflict with that. They're not going to lose a patient to me. They're not going to hear something different than the chiropractic message. Every person I work with and talk to gets recommended a chiropractor, referred when applicable. And so it's very synergistic. And I like that too, because I know when they're coming from a chiropractic's office, I know, kind of what I'm going to deal with. When they're coming off the street or even from a medic's office, you don't know, man. I don't know what's going on. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you.
And for everybody else there, don't forget to shift on. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you have received value from this episode, please share this with a fellow chiropractor and take some time to rate and review us on iTunes or wherever your favorite place is to listen to podcasts. If you're interested in learning more about our programs and events, please visit www.thevitalityshift.com or connect with me on Facebook. I would love to hear from you. So until next time, Dr. Don out.